Acharya Prashant is a religious and spiritual teacher from India. So Prashant does many in-person events where he speaks to thousands, if not maybe millions, I'm not sure, people every year. And these seem to be quite interactive events. So there's a lot of audience participation, there's a lot of Q&A, but he also has a large online following as well. His English YouTube channel has over 2 million subscribers and his Hindi YouTube channel has over 40 million. So he clearly has a large following and a significant amount of influence. And he speaks on a range of subjects, but the one subject that I'm interested in this video is his thoughts on antinatalism. And this is actually a topic which he's spoken a decent amount about. In this video, I want to go over what his views on antinatalism are and whether we can legitimately call him an antinatalist. Now, I am in no way an expert on this guy, and I understand that I don't exist within the cultural context or religious context that he is in. So there are going to be other people who are going to be much more informed about the context he is speaking in. And so if there are things that I say in this video, or maybe things I haven't said in this video, which add context to the things he's saying and make my interpretation of them less plausible, then please put that in the comments. So the bulk of where I could find Acharya Prashant talking about antinatalism was on his YouTube channel. And the first thing to note is that he doesn't shy away from having it front and center in the videos that he is talking about it. I'm popping up on screen now a few examples of videos where the thumbnail and the title explicitly have antinatalism in them. I find this quite interesting because I think people who generally have a large audience or are well respected for things unrelated to antinatalism may be prone, if they are antinatalist, to leaving it on the sidelines or dumbing it down so that they don't alienate their established following. But obviously this just isn't the case with Prashant. And then the next thing I thought is, well, is his antinatalism actually antinatalism as we sort of understand it, right? Or is it a sort of quasi-antinatalism that is more spiritually informed and it's centered around spiritual pursuits rather than the care for the sentient being who could be brought into existence? And that brings us to the first clip.
If the child is born suffering, why do you want to bring more child to the world to make them suffer? What is the point in ensuring that the cycle continues? What is the great need or the great virtue? And what is the great catastrophe if it all,
So when going into watching clips of Prashant, I kind of assumed that if he was antinatalist, it would probably be spiritually informed. But it seems here that at least in part, his antinatalism is actually centered around moral concern for the being that could be created, and that suffering is the locus of that moral concern. And what I also found interesting was that the clip starts off with a young woman who's asking a question, openly identifying as an antinatalist.
I personally believe in the antinatalist philosophy, and I do not intend to procreate myself, although I would consider perhaps adopting children at some point.
This is really cool to see because it shows that in this environment that he's set up or that he's attracted, it's such that people who hold these views feel comfortable enough to be able to openly identify with the label. And that isn't something that can be taken for granted in many other places. And the question she asks is his views on voluntary human extinction.
What kind of a world do you see with majority of people being antinatals, and then do you see the human civilization coming to an end at some point in the future? Or what does the
what
picture
I'll say,
us?
if not considered rightly, will appear either vile or hilarious. There is no great virtue in the human civilization continuing.
So he's not only adopted an antinatalist position, but he's actually thought about the philosophical implications of it. So it doesn't seem like some side belief that he hasn't really put any thought into. It seems that he spent at least some time thinking about this topic. Now, it's also interesting that he links the idea of antinatalism to the concept of Ahimsa, which essentially means non-violence.
It is very strange how religions have often said that it is violence and sinful to kill, but no one has ever emphasized that there is great violence in procreation. Today, Ahimsa consists less of not killing. Today, the greatest act of Ahimsa is to not to reproduce. Violence lies less in killing. Today, violence lies much more in giving birth.
So, interestingly, and actually similar to Gandhi as well, and I'll link my video on Gandhi in the end cards and in the description, Prashant is essentially saying here that whether or not you see the act of creating someone itself as violent, creating someone exposes that individual to violence. And so even in that way, the act of creating someone can be seen as an act of violence and not in accordance with Ahimsa. I think this is the line that he's taking here. On a very simple level, to act in such a way where someone will die as a result of your action is not in accordance with the principle of Ahimsa. But this is exactly what creating someone does. There can be no death without birth. And another thing I want to touch on when it comes to his views that are related or informed by antinatalism, as opposed to his antinatalist views themselves, are his views on the parent-child relationship and the obligations, duties, and responsibilities that come from that.
First of all, if the child says, "Why did you bring me into this world?" the parents must straight away apologize. And it is because parents have first of all committed the mistake of bringing another person into this world of agony, longing and suffering, that they compensate by investing themselves in raising the kid. That is why it is imperative for the parents to bring education to the kid, give food to the kid, spend money on the kid. It is a compensation. Have you seen how much of parents' time, especially the mother's time, gets spent on the kid? It has to be done. It is a thing of justice. It is not a favor to the kid. The parents owe it to the kid. And the kid is very justified in asking, did I really plead to you to bring me into this world? Did I send a formal application? You, in your moment of personal wisdom and planned indiscretion or unplanned lust, gave birth to me. Now I sue you. Now I demand damages. And all the money that gets spent on the kid is actually a compensation. Compensation for that moment of indiscretion.
So in this clip, Prashant talks about his views on the parent-child relationship, which seems to be heavily influenced by his antinatalism. Although it should be noted that this is not the only interpretation of the parent-child relationship that antinatalists can have. Prashant goes as far as to call birth a crime, and that parents need to spend a significant amount of time paying off their debt to the child they've created. As he says, when parents create someone, they are heavily indebted to that person for putting them into a world full of agony and suffering when there was no one who existed to want to come into that world in the first place. He also says that offspring should sue their parents, which perhaps is more of a principled point than a practical one. And maybe he's even heard of the case of another Indian guy, Raphael Samuel, who just threatened to sue his parents and became an international sensation for a period of time. And I've got an interview that I've done with Raphael Samuel, which I will put in the description. But anyway, it's good that Prashant sees the efforts that parents have to go to for their children, not as a favor that they do their child, but as an obligation that they have chosen to take on themselves by creating another person. Anyway, I think that gives an overview of his comments on antinatalism that I found, at least. I now quickly want to go on and talk a bit about his views on animals. Acharya Prashant is also a vegan and a prominent animal rights activist. In fact, in 2022, Peter India named him as the most influential vegan of that year. He was also recently featured in the documentary Christspiracy as a vegan spiritual religious leader. And I also found mention on his website of where he talks about how he thinks veganism and antinatalism are actually interlinked. The transcript on his website is of a conversation that he has as part of a Q&A with an audience member. The article is Winning the Everest Without Killing, and it says, First of all, veganism cannot be a dietary thing only. I don't take dairy, so I am vegan. Not possible, sir. Not possible. Veganism also cannot just be about using vegan products like non-leather belts and shoes and clothes and such things. It has to exceed that as well. Veganism has to be a certain philosophy of life. Think of vegans who happily have 3 kids. How are they vegan? Don't you know that when you procreate, it is the grossest kind of cruelty towards animals? You are creating consumers. The fellow that is born would need roads, would need hospital, would need school, would need a lot of stuff to consume throughout his life, and would in his life procreate and create more consumers. So giving birth is the mightiest act of cruelty today. So veganism, antinatalism, minimalism, they have to go together. And at the root of all of them is simple spirituality, which you could also call as common sense. So in conclusion, is Acharya Prashant an antinatalist? I think it is relatively clear that he's an antinatalist. He's mentioned a variety of avenues that he's arrived at an antinatalist conclusion from, including a focus on the being whom will be created. And he's even thought about the implications of this view, i.e. extinction. So I think it's safe to say that he is an antinatalist. Again, like I said, let me know if I've missed anything about the context or I've missed anything else he's said as well. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.